You guys remember the Bayesian Superyacht that sank? Italian authorities are working to raise the superyacht and the investigation continues, but the New York Times did an article on why it sank, and the people who built it are still demanding that it's unsinkable, and now legal battles are happening. We covered the Bayesian yacht sinking on the Practical Sailor channel. I'll leave a link in the description so you can watch that if you want to. And if you go over to Practical Sailor, don't forget to subscribe, please. Basically, the sinking, based on all the information we had when we made that episode, was caused by a number of factors. Here's a snip from that video. The 55.9 meter or 183 foot sailing yacht Bayesian has a beam of 11.51 meters or 38 feet wide and a draft of 9.73 meters over 30 feet deep. Previously named Salute, Bayesian has an internal volume of 473 gross tons and once boasted the tallest aluminum mast in the world at 75 meters or 246 feet. Of the 10 yachts built on this design, Bayesian was the only single mast sloop. All the others had multiple masts, so Bayesian had the tallest mast and added ballast to support that rig. The almost 250 feet of mast and 200,000 pounds of ballast. Naval architect Bill Prince on Power and Motor Yacht explained that a typical 50-foot racing sailboat will have an angle of vanishing stability of about 130 degrees. The forces of the wind and water and waves can bring that boat beyond 90 degrees, so the tip of the mast is 30 feet underwater, and the boat will have enough righting energy to return upright. The Bayesian, being of much less ballast to weight ratio, has an angle of vanishing stability of just 88 degrees, and that's with the keel down. As we know from accident reports, the keel was not down. The Bayesian had a swing keel that was only required to be down while she was under sail or 60 nautical miles offshore. As she was anchored, the keel was in the up and stowed position. There was testimony from the crew that said the keel made noise while in the down position at anchor, and since it was not required to be down, it was kept up and stowed. Anybody with a swing keel knows that noise. While down, the angle of vanishing stability of the vessel's ability to right herself after a knockdown was 88 degrees, but in the up position, the angle she'd right herself at was reduced to 77 degrees. From the stability information book that the manufacturer sent with the vessel, another number is important, the down flooding angle. This is the angle at which the boat will start taking on water through its many open ports. As the vessel was at anchor, the air conditioning running, the HVAC ports would have all been open, her generators running and their exhaust and intake ports open, ventilation ports, and of course companionway doors. Many have testified that the giant sliding glass doors are the main entry to the interior of the vessel, and at a heel, they would slide open under their own weight. Locking pins were to be installed while the vessel sailed. As these pocket doors are so heavy, they would just open as soon as the boat heeled. Those pins would not have been installed at anchor, for they would effectively lock the guests inside. The down flooding angle reported from the manufacturer when the ship would take on water is just 45 degrees. So in theory, if you could grab the mast and tip the boat over to 46 degrees while she was at anchor with all her ports open, she would eventually sink from water ingress. How long that would take is anyone's guess. The New York Times just picked up the story and said all the same stuff. The boat was meant to have two masts, and the Bayesian model was built with one very large mast instead, causing the design to require more ballast, making it sit lower in the water. The down flooding angle was very little if all the ports were open. The keel was up, which greatly reduced her stability, and on and on. The design just wasn't capable of standing up to an insane freak weather event, and that's just what happened. A storm system blew through the anchorage in a freak set of circumstances, knocked the Bayesian over. Now, this happens sometimes, and most sailboats that have been through a downspout or freak event like this do survive. Their angle of vanishing stability makes them fall down, but when knocked down, they immediately pop back up. Even if they do start to take on water, they still right themselves. The Bayesian obviously did not. It was knocked down by a near impossible freak weather event, and She just stayed down, likely caused by her huge mast, her 90,000-pound keel in the upright position, many AC and generator and ventilation ports wide open, and down-flooding cockpit with open glass doors. The boat filled up with water after being knocked down. Now, the manufacturer of Perini Navi, who made the Bayesian, says no. They say the boat is unsinkable even as she sits on the seabed right now for all to see. They say if the crew had acted right, she would be unsinkable. They claim that in the event of a storm or a major weather event, the crew should have closed all the ports, the generator ports, the engine ports, AC and ventilation ports, hatches, and installed the locking pins in those giant glass companionway doors. They then should have weighed anchor and motored the boat directly into the wind. And yes, that's entirely true. When we see a gale coming or a squall line, even on our little boats, we reduce sail or we douse it entirely, start the engine if we can, and point the bow into the squall. We drop the ballasted keel if that's applicable to your boat, and yes, that makes the boat safer as the bow will push through the weather event. It's an uncomfortable maneuver, but anyone who's ever been on a sailboat taking a massive wake or a sudden squall on the beam knows the beam is not a good way because it'll roll the boat over, risking you getting thrown overboard or the boat rolling. Bow into the weather under power is the way, but the Bayesian was at anchor. She was settled into her anchorage and configured with the jennies running and the ports open. Now, I'm not sure how long it takes to ready a 56-meter superyacht for passage and weigh anchor, but I can tell you on a 40-footer, takes a little bit of time. And this freak weather event didn't give them any time. Before they knew it, they found themselves fighting for their lives on a sailboat that was laying down on her side with flooding water coming in. She sure doesn't seem to be unsinkable. In the aviation community and NTSB, the result of such an accident would result in the manufacturer being requested to make some changes, such as installing automatic valves at any opening port and a hull design with a point of vanishing stability to be much more than 70 or 80 degrees, a downflooding angle to be greatly increased and bolstered by ports that close automatically at a given heel or at the detection of water ingress. But this isn't the aviation industry. In the aviation industry, safety takes a big priority, where in the superyacht industry, it seems profits drive things a lot more. My takeaway from this for real life, because we don't own superyachts, is that anything can happen at any time. We can't trust the manufacturer of our boat, so we have to trust our preparedness and our actions when things do hit the fan. We have a plan for squalls and sudden freak weather events. We start by boarding up and closing hatches. If you're not at anchor or protected, you got to reduce canvas if you can and possibly start the engine. Staying under power, whether it's sail or engine, and in control of the vessel's direction and travel and the speed is critical. We know from taking freighter wakes and plunging the bow under that staying in control usually means the difference between a hard plowing through water and almost being rolled over by taking it on the beam. We never take it on the beam. Being under power and in control can mean all the difference between uncomfortable and total disaster. If we're at anchor, we batten down, we clear the deck, and we board everything up. Also, put a few extra wraps in the furling headsail and double make sure that the furling line is secure so the jib can't possibly get free in the unlikely event that something goes wrong. I also like to put a ratchet strap over my solar panels and pay out way more on the dinghy painter if the rib happens to be in the water. Having a plan is the first step, and the second step is executing that plan early, super early if you can. If there's a possibility of a weather event hitting you, you should be prepared for it an hour beforehand or even more. The worst case is that you were wrong and you were too prepared and you have to undo all those things when nothing eventually ends up happening. But then it was good practice anyway. The mission here at Lady K Sailing has always been to get more people sailing more easily, and I couldn't do it without you. A big thank you to all the patrons who make this all possible by giving as little as a couple of bucks an episode. If you'd like to help out, please consider becoming a patron. Until next time, friends, keep the heavy side down, but definitely not that far down. We'll see you guys next time.